Living Power with Dan Hurst.
Let's pick it up with verse 30. Lot and his two daughters left Zoar and settled in the mountains, for he was afraid to stay in Zoar. He and his two daughters lived in a cave. One day the older daughter said to the younger, "Our father is old, and there is no man around here to lie with us, as is the custom all over the earth. Let's get our father to drink wine, and then lie with him and preserve our family line through our father." That night they got their father to drink wine, and the older daughter went in and lay with him. He was not aware of it when she lay down or when she got up. The next day the older daughter said to the younger, "Last night I lay with my father. Let's get him to drink wine again tonight, and you go in and lie with him so we can preserve our family line through our father." So they got their father to drink wine that night also, and the younger daughter went and lay with him. Again, he was not aware of it when she lay down or when she got up. So both of Lot's daughters became pregnant by their father. The older daughter had a son, and she named him Moab. He is the father of the Moabites of today. The younger daughter also had a son. She named him Ben-Ami. He's the father of the Ammonites today. Now, it's easy to miss some key facts in this story because we get so caught up in kind of the horror of this whole, like, what? Did this really happen? Is this really in the Bible? Notice that Lot, the very first thing that we see in verse 30 is that Lot left Zoar because he was afraid and moved to the mountains. Why? It's possible that he feared, the Bible says that he was afraid. It's possible that he was afraid that the desolation that had fallen on the land might also fall on Zoar, even though the angel had told him that Zoar would be spared. But he may have just thought, this isn't going to be safe to stay here. Zoar is going to be destroyed also. Remember, Zoar was it was part of that 5-city area down in the south of the Salt Lake area, or the Dead Sea, that was really disobedient to the Lord. And so it was important for Lot to really understand what was going on, that the whole area had been disobedient to God. And so maybe he was afraid that something was going to happen to Zoar also. Lot takes his daughters and he moves to the mountains, which were probably the very mountains that God told him to go to originally. Remember, the two angels said, "Go to the mountains, flee to the mountains." They said, "I can't make it to the mountains. This isn't going to work." And so he has to go to Zoar, and they give him permission to do so. Well, now he goes to the mountains, probably the very mountains which God had told him to go to originally, and he takes up residence in a cave. And now he's in survival mode. He's lost everything. He's lost his wife. He's lost his wealth. He's lost his friends. He has nothing. And for all he knows, even Abraham has been killed in the devastation. I'm sure that they thought that the whole world had been destroyed. Now, it appears that Lot was really struggling with his faith. Yes, God told him originally to go to the mountains, but he also assured him that Zoar would be spared. Did Lot just not trust God? Was that the issue? Or did he finally realize that Zoar was no better than Sodom and Gomorrah, and so he felt he needed to get out of there? Now, I don't in any way want to justify what Lot's daughters did, but I want you to see something very, very revealing. And in this chart, this is kind of a timeline of the people of Genesis, beginning back with Adam. This is the ages of Adam, and then the ages of his son Seth, and so forth and so on. There's Enoch and Methuselah, and there's Noah, who lived 900 and some odd years there, and that's about where he died. Well, if you drop down, here you see Abraham. Right there. Abraham was certainly alive toward the end of Noah's life. But look at this. Shem was also alive, and it was through Shem, the lineage came through from Noah through Shem for the line of this family. So Abraham was still alive, and Shem was still alive. And Abraham and Lot's daughters probably knew the story of this destruction of the earth well. Over and over again. And Uncle Shem, Grandpa Shem, still knew, but was still alive. And Noah, for all we know, Noah may have still been alive at that point. We don't know. So if we follow this timeline and realize that they were still alive, then we have to realize that the destruction of the world was still very present in the mind of the descendants. Now, every time I study this passage and I read the commentaries by the theologians and some of the Bible scholars about what happened between Lot and his daughters, I really get disgusted on the debate, because the debate always seems to center on whether or not Lot's daughters were acting out of sin or whether they were actually acting nobly because they thought it was up to them to repropagate the world, and thinking that their lineage had been destroyed. And that surely what happened to Sodom and Gomorrah was worldwide, and so therefore they felt justified. One writer has gone so far to suggest that Abraham had sinfully abandoned Lot and his family, and that somehow he must share in some of the blame. I was like, man, you guys are really pushing it. The general argument is this. There's three sides to the argument. First of all, that it was not through any sensual desire that the daughters of Lot deceived their father. That it wasn't a sensual thing. They felt justified to do that. Secondly, they might have thought that it may have been criminal to marry into another family, because there were people alive. Let's remember, they had been in Zoar, so they knew that there were still people alive. But maybe they thought that marrying into those people would have been wrong, and they probably believed that their kindred had perished in what must have seemed like a worldwide destruction, and maybe that Abraham and his kin had also been destroyed. And then the third part of it is they might have supposed that there was no other way to preserve the family line. Now, my job here is not to defend or to condemn Lot and his daughters. My job is to draw some conclusions and some applications and some implications from what happened. So, what did happen? Well, what happened was that both daughters got pregnant by their drunk father. That's what happened. And the oldest daughter had a son named Moab, and the youngest had a son named Ben-Ami. And the fact is that from those two sons of Lot were born the Moabites and the Ammonites. The story of Lot's life ends in the cave. Himself, other than referring back to his life. But there's no more history about Lot at this point. The last we hear about Lot is he's living in a cave, and he's drunk, and he's lost everything. That's the last of Lot's life. It's a story of a life that had every opportunity for greatness. He was the nephew of Abraham, so close to Abraham that he was like a son to him. He saw God work in Abraham's life. He saw God work in his own life. Remember, his life had been rescued and spared so many times. He was somewhat sensitive to the things of God, but he still chose to go his own way, like so many Christians today. He was there when God began to lay out his plans for the redemption of man, but he missed it because he was too caught up in his own life. He could have played a major role in changing the world for good. But he got stuck in his own little world, and he contributed nothing of eternal value to the world. Where are the Moabites and the Ammonites today? This was a life of mediocrity. His was a life where he could have been so used of God, but he chose not to. He chose to live in his own little world and his own little life. That's where he ended up. Where are you today? Where are you today? What is God up to in your life? Are you like Lot? Are you so caught up in your own little world and your own problems that you've missed out on what God is really, really up to? Look what happened. He became the father of the Moabites and the Ammonites. And Deuteronomy says, now Moses is traveling, he's bringing the Israelites, we're jumping ahead several years, he's bringing the Israelites out of Egypt, and they've been wandering in the desert for 40 years, and he's bringing them up on the east side of the Dead Sea. And God says to Moses in Deuteronomy chapter 2, and first of all in verse 9, he says, "The Lord said to me, don't harass the Moabites or provoke them to war, for I will not give you any part of their land. I have given Ar," that was that area, "to the descendants of Lot as a possession." And then in verse 19, it says, "And when you come to the Ammonites, don't harass them or provoke them to war, for I will not give you possession of any land belonging to the Ammonites. I have given it as a possession to the descendants of Lot." Now I want you to see on the map where the Moabites and the Ammonites established themselves. You see there's the Dead Sea right here. There's the Sea of Galilee. There's the Dead Sea right there. And don't worry about this red line was the path that Abraham took. These purple lines here were the Israelites took when Moses led them out. So here, this area was the area that was known as Ar, and right there was the area where the Moabites lived, and right there was the area where the Ammonites lived. So here were the Moabites, just east of what is now Israel, and the Ammonites are up in this area. Today, show them the next map, if you will, and that's the area that is Syria, and this is the area that is now known as Jordan. So that kind of gives you a perspective of where they settled, and as you look through the Bible and you see how the Moabites and the Ammonites played into the lives of the Israelites, you see how close they were and the impact that they had on the Israelites. And sure enough, they had some tremendous impact. If you'll recall, and we'll see this here in a few moments, it was Solomon that began building a relationship with the Moabites and Ammonites and married some Moabite women and interacted with Israel. It really made a big impact on them, not for good, because they disobeyed God in so many ways, and one of the ways that they disobeyed Him was the relationship with the Moabites and the Ammonites. So let's look at these Moabites and Ammonites. I call them the children of the cave. The Moabites were born to Moab. Essentially, they came from Moab, who was the oldest of the two sons. This was born to Lot's oldest daughter. But remember, Moab and Ben-Ami were Lot's sons. So it wasn't like these were grandchildren. These were his kids. These were his sons, birthed through his daughters. The Moabites became idolaters, which included human sacrifices to their god. Their god was known as Chemosh, and they even led the Israelites into idolatry. Look what Numbers 25 verses 1 through 3 says. While Israel was staying at Shittim, the men began to indulge in sexual immorality with Moabite women, who invited them to sacrifice to their gods. The people ate and bowed down before those gods. So Israel joined in worshiping the Baal of Peor, and the Lord's anger burned against them. So Israel began to interact with the Moabites through the line, if you will, of Lot. See what Lot's mediocrity contributed? Then there were the Ammonites. The Ammonites were through Ben-Ami. That was the son that was born to the youngest of Lot's daughters. People actually, the Moabites and Ammonites were. But the Ammonites were special. 11:2 says, "But Nahash, the right eye of every one of you, and so in Amos chapter 1 verse 13, "But this is what the Lord, even for I will not turn back." Brutal people. Grass with the head of a cow, and his arms were stretched out, and on those get disgusted with their pagan. I mean, babies because they thought it would bring How are we as a nation any less